What's the biggest challenge in building a product that prioritizes impact over profit? Today's guest has built a massive digital ecosystem around this exact question. From designing products that protect privacy to scaling mission-driven teams, he's been at the forefront of innovation in the tech for good space. I'm Mark Garcia, and you're listening to the Product Builders Podcast. And today we're joined by Kevin Williams, VP of Digital Products at Planned Parenthood. Kevin's team manages an enormous digital ecosystem, and they've been pushing the boundaries of innovation within healthcare. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, welcome. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Likewise. And before we dive in, I always like to start by letting my guests introduce themselves. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this work?
Cool. Well, I first say that everything I do is unconventional. So I always like to lead with that. I have a very interesting career that ranges everything from consulting to fashion and entertainment to building websites and strategy and things like that, to actually, like the world we'll talk about now, is building, scaling things within technology for good. We didn't call it for good, but that's what it's becoming, for good. So
Right.
to do the right thing for folks that deserve it. So yeah.
Thank you. I'd love to, before we get into the heart of the conversation, set the stage. So when people think about tech, they often picture, fast-moving startups, venture capital, profit-driven innovation. But building digital products for social impact, I imagine, has different challenges. So I'm calling it tech for good, what does that actually mean in practice? And in what ways does it differ from your traditional product development when you're building product for profit?
Yeah, I think that the important thing is always worth lifting up is you're really there to solve a problem, right? And hopefully address an opportunity. And so I think there's a tendency when you think about whether you make millions of dollars on selling a product versus whether you're able to impact people's lives, have positive outcomes, and in our case, the work that we do, health outcomes. The measures of success look very different, right? So you have to design differently, you have to plan differently, you have to resource differently, because the reality is you don't always have what you need in the beginning. You learn a lot along the way, and often it takes a long time to see the progress that you think you're supposed to have in this work. And so it really requires a thoughtfulness around problem solving. So it's like, if you look at the work that we're doing in Tech for Good versus any other work, it always should come from solving a problem. But I think as you think about it over the long term and how you should support it, it's really about the impact that you would like to have, and building a team and structure around that. And it's not an easy thing to accomplish, I promise you. But that is the mindset behind our thinking.
Right. So product development, we're all solving problems where in Tech for Good, you're solving real societal challenges versus, say, efficiency within a technical platform. So can you tell me a little bit about how technology is playing a role in advancing sexual and reproductive health currently?
Yeah, it's very, one of the great things about technology is most folks have some form of access to it. We certainly can have a conversation around who has the best access and who needs access to it. But in reproductive healthcare, there's a whole component of education and understanding through information, content, and helping folks make empowered decisions around their reproductive and sexual health. And then there's a whole conversation around how do we connect people to receiving that care. And within our organization, and many organizations providing this range of offering, it's super important, the work that we do at Planned Parenthood, because of our mission, our brand, and who we're here to serve. And that's certainly core to the work that we do on a daily basis.
Right. And when you consider the mission of Planned Parenthood, obviously there's a huge responsibility that is part of the work that you do, which requires you to have a team deeply committed to that mission, right?
Yes.
So now transitioning into the heart of this conversation, building teams that drive real impact. I think building teams in general is something that leaders can struggle with, regardless of any industry or vertical that you're in. I imagine within a mission-driven organization where resources and priorities can shift fast, you have an extra layer of challenges that maybe others don't. So when you first stepped into this role, what was the biggest challenge in structuring a team that could deliver both speed as well as impact and a product, right? I mean, that's a heavy question, but let's start there.
Well, what I would say is the biggest challenge is knowing where to start. There is always an overwhelming challenge in front of you that you're feeling that you have to respond to. You will never have enough people and roles and tools for this thing to be perfect. But what you have to learn to be okay with is there are a core set of things that you need to start with. We're a product team. We need engineering. We need designers. We need people evaluating the experience. We need to be thinking about the best way to optimize our things. And so our products and our offering. And so you have to kind of start with that core group of folks to develop your best practices around identifying where your needs are, where your gaps are, where those real opportunities are. But my advice to people is always right size, start with the biggest priorities, and make sure that you bring on folks that are smart and unafraid to try new and different things.
That's really great advice. And I think knowing where to start, that really hit a little bit with me, because I feel like that can be the biggest problem as well when I have to scale my team up. How do you balance hiring for expertise versus, let's say, values, right? So one of the things I know I look for in hiring is, in addition to technical expertise, a culture fit. For your organization, is there a way that you can assess, values, alignment with brand mission, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. I mean, you have to care about our mission. You have to actually care about people and be committed to building your work around creating solutions for that. So I think it takes a type of personality and energy to just even walk into the room. I'll tell you, our work is unique because sometimes it's very chaotic, very, very fast and rapid response focused. And sometimes we have to respond to external things outside of our control. So we really need people to be able to think outside of the box and to be agile in that moment to respond to those things. And so we have to have folks that actually understand the range of emotions required to be resilient and to navigate through many knowns and many unknowns. So I usually start there. And then, of course, having a no assholes rule on your team is always helpful.
That's a great one. I feel like I'm going to adopt that as well for my hiring requirements. But I feel like that's a given, right? Maybe not enough hiring managers just say that out loud. But so again, you mentioned on your team, things can be fast-paced and chaotic. How do you keep your team motivated when some of the work you do can feel really high stakes and emotionally charged, because we're talking about, sensitive topics?
I would say this is the biggest challenge area for us. In a lot of ways, our teams feel the pressure of contributing to improving folks' outcomes, especially around, we want people to make informed decisions about their lives, but the system that we have, the network and system and healthcare and education programs that exist across the country are not perfect, and they're not connected. And so our teams sometimes feel the pressure of just making sure that in the world we're in, that we really show up and show out for folks that we serve. And I think sometimes there's the fear that if we don't get it perfect the first time, that somehow we could be contributing to harm. If we don't move fast enough, we may not necessarily be supporting folks in the way that we perceive we should. But I often remind the team that a collective commitment to us continuing to stay the course and moving our work forward as planned and identifying any tweaks or opportunities on the way is the work. And sometimes there are things completely outside of our control that we can't fix, but we can really do our best in the world that we actually have influence over. And I think that that message carries them through some of the more challenging times.
Got it. And I guess similarly, are there specific strategies or approaches you use to also foster, a sense of creativity and innovation? It sounds like you have to be both reactive to things as well as thinking, long-term future, what can we do down the line? So is there things that you do, best practices or approaches you do?
Yeah, you always want to keep it fun. You always want to keep it interesting. And so when you speak to creativity, it's not only the designers that have the opportunity to be creative. Everyone has an opportunity on our team to kind of contributing to something that is interesting, unique, or different across the team. It's clear that we're here to serve patients, that we're here to serve people, but the way we go about doing, I love to see the team become a little competitive in that, well, we should do this or we should do that. And the cross collaborative spirit that they have, but also the sense of competition that they have of really elevating their game in the moment of situation or perceived crisis to respond to the moment. And I just love to see them, the team really double down on coming up with ways to fix things. And so I think that is a cultural piece that we really supported the organization. And I personally, as a leader, enjoy that.
I love that you said everybody has the opportunity to be creative and it's not just the creatives. I think when you pull in thoughts and experiences from other team members, other people with different life experiences, that's when you get the best solutions to products because they're very well-rounded, well thought about.
Right.
So I know you manage a large ecosystem of different interconnected things, correct? How does your team, or how do you maintain focus on, let's say, user needs and building product while balancing the complexity of just interconnected systems and products?
Well, this is connected to your earlier question. We didn't start out this way. We've actually become mature over the years to build out this functionality across the team. I mean, some of the learnings in the beginning was we just needed to have product people. It's just ears and words. And then we were like, oh my goodness, this is not just an A/B test. We actually need to build a community around research and best practices and engagement so that we can build solutions that support real feedback that we get from users and learn about, groups that are disproportionately impacted by some of the societal challenges. And so what we've done is it comes as trade-offs, right? Because you can't do everything. So we've consciously decided that equity is centering our work around equity and thinking about accessibility and marginalized groups of folks or any group that could be targeted or challenged to prioritize some of their experiences, because we have a belief that if you design for those the most in need, you design for all. And so we're really trying to build a framework around identifying those groups of folks and then making sure that we have that type of culture in our team that we just leave no one behind. And so there's the trade-off, but then also understanding who we're designing for and building for.
I love that phrase of you're leaving no one behind. And if you design for the most in need, you're designing for everyone. That's a really great perspective on things. And you said a couple of keywords for me: equity, accessibility. So I know up until now, we've been talking about structuring your team for success, hiring. But of course, the real test is how do you measure whether all of that's working? So that's where I'd like to head next. Success in mission-driven work looks different from success in, let's say, a startup chasing revenue or obviously something for profit. So how do you measure success when the goal isn't profit, but it's cultural change, societal change, things beyond financial value?
Well, we still have a format of qualitative versus quantitative because we always want to make sure that we're making good use of our resources. And so there's always, we have millions of folks coming to our website and navigating through our digital ecosystem. So just at scale, it's super important that we prioritize their experiences, but the quality, a lot of our folks sometimes are just coming to us for information and they don't need care. And so when thinking about, was that a sale or is that a conversion or is that all of the language that we use in identifying success for us is, well, the quality of that experience is, well, maybe we answered a question for them and that's all they needed. And so what we try to do is build tools into our ecosystem to kind of verify and check periodically how well we're delivering in the moment while preserving people's privacy and not exposing them to any type of risk by sharing their information with us.
Got it. And I know you're talking qualitative. On the flip side, looking at quantitative metrics, are there specific metrics that you do look at to see if your products are making a difference? Is it like views, or what does that look like for you?
So we like every other organization, we have a funnel, a marketing funnel, and we're always evaluating, as we're acquiring new folks interested in learning more about Planned Parenthood, our brand, and familiar with our brand. So we obviously look at volume and engagement. A lot of that is shifted because of new AI tools and other ways that users go about searching for information. So we're kind of learning in real time how volume is shifting. I think we're also recognizing just the level of engagement that users have on our properties. Are they coming for 5 seconds, or are they spending a couple minutes on various pages? We obviously take a look at most visited pages and align those with some of the important subject matter content things that are lifted up by users. And so we just look at a lot of data across the core products themselves, which range from everything from period trackers, scheduling tools, to bots, to just information, blogs, and other fundraising efforts. And so just kind of watching the behavior across each one of those work streams.
That's really interesting. And I wanted to go back to the topic of, equity and accessibility. I think you mentioned earlier that most people do have access to these tools, but how do you ensure that technology serves the people who need it most, whether that is giving accessibility to a group of people who might not have that technology or who might not be quite as tech savvy? And how do you balance that with, AI is a big thing and people are creating I feel like people are creating a lot of things for the sake of creating cool things.
Yes.
So how do you balance? How do you make sure that technology is being used appropriately for what you do?
Well, remember, so just to clarify, I think that most people have access to some form of technology.
Okay.
I don't think there is equity in the technology that people have access to. So when you think about various modalities, apps, and other more complicated experiences, feel very different than allowing people to pick up a phone and call. And so for us, in the work that we do, we have to account for those. We have to meet people where they are. And sometimes a design solution is getting them to a number where they can call to talk to a human. And so we know that, or an SMS message or something asynchronous, or, it's not all about innovation and virtual care and fancy everything that's future facing. It's really about designing systems and solutions that allow us to be flexible and meet people where they are. And so I think we are always thinking about traditional ways to connect with people and new and innovative ways as well.
That's great. And that is perfect segue for kind of this next topic that I'd like to talk about. We've talked about success metrics for impact-driven work. I'd like to pivot into the idea, quote unquote, of innovation, right? So innovation in social impact work isn't, as you said, just about using the latest tech. It's about applying technology in ways that are ethical, effective, and centered around real human needs. And that need might be just giving you access to a phone number. So I know you have experimented at Planned Parenthood with different ways of expanding access to digital health tools. I know I've seen a chatbot product on the market there. How do you think about innovation, and can you expand on your thoughts on innovation within a mission-driven space? And what does it mean truly for you when we talk about innovating?
Well, I would just say the label of innovation has evolved for us over the last decade, just myself personally and for us as an organization. And I think even that term, innovation, we should challenge ourselves around what we mean by that. I think for myself specifically in the work that our team is doing, at one point in time, what we wanted to do is to learn best how to build something, scale it, and really own it. That was, to us at one point, that was innovation. And then I think we moved to rather than us having to build something ourselves, how do we think of the technology of more user or end user focus? And that's when we started to think about conversations at scale. Because if you think about where we are in that space now, we started working with Rue, which is our chatbot, which was originally targeted for young adults and teenagers around sex ed. It was just we were just exploring to see what that experience would be like. And so in some ways that was innovative as well. But as you can see, the modality of chat has shifted significantly over the last 5 years. So we're revisiting what that potentially means for us. I also think that innovation comes from reducing friction for people, for users, digital users specifically. I think we love to design fancy things that we think are good. And then we fail to learn over time that, some of our workflows don't make sense. Things that should be manual, should be automated. There's all these different conversations around how we fix the technology and not make the user suffer much. And so I'm seeing innovation these days as really thinking about streamlining the point of access for information that folks have around what we do at Planned Parenthood, and really thinking about how we are listed as a source of truth and a reliable source in the delivery of care, the education around sexual and reproductive health, and then of course responding to the moment in our advocacy work. And so the innovation may not feel as shiny and sexy as it did before, but I think innovation today is really about simplifying people's lives. And so that's where our team is right now, because I think there's a lot of chaos in digital. There's a lot of noise in digital. And so some of that has come from innovation. And so I think we need to dial it back a little bit and be innovative around how we fix the mess that we've created.
I love that. And I agree. I think the term innovate has gotten so muddied over the past couple of years that it truly does feel, I still use it. Of course, people like to hear it. But I agree. I think innovation no longer has the same definition that it had pre all this technology, right? And I love how you've taken it back to simplification. How do you simplify, reduce friction? Because there is a lot of chaos. So that's such a great insight into how you perceive innovation. On the flip side, there are a lot of emerging technologies. We've got AI is the biggest hot topic in product design, generative AI, all of that. Are there any new digital initiatives or tools or plans to use AI? Are there any emerging technologies you're really excited about kind of experimenting and implementing with, where you feel they could actually have a benefit to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we're exploring, I don't, the moment that we're in right now is beyond challenging, is what I will say. I think that we have a large group of folks trying to understand how to respond to the moment. There's a lot of misinformation out there. As social has become the place where folks get their information from, through the influencers, they learn about, in our place, sexual and reproductive health. That's something we really need to make sure we're paying attention to, that sector and how it's growing and how we respond to that moment. I think while we are excited about AI, there is a lot of concerns about where a generative AI can go and any potential harm that it can create, because we don't necessarily have guardrails around what is put out into the world. And so we obviously have our radar on that. But I think we're open to innovation. We continue to be open to innovation because we know that the people we serve, which is everyone from very young folks to later in their life, they're tied to their technology now. And so how do we think of AI in a smart way and recognize the value that it creates at scale for us? Because having to use humans for every conversation, for every type of interaction is costly and not necessarily the most efficient way of using anyone's time, right? So freeing those humans up to do more productive work, explore new talents, and do other things in day to day, we think is a positive impact coming from these types of technology. It's just really kind of learning where to test and learn and try things, but also protect and not expose ourselves to even more potential challenges in this space.
Yeah, and to build on that, I had a question regarding just like security and trust. I imagine that is something you have to consider in terms of how do we keep information secure? How do we build trust and instill a sense of trust with users in a climate where there might not be a lot of trust coming into things? What impact does that play in the work you do, and how do you have to consider that? I imagine you have to consider that at all levels, but can you expand on that?
Well, we go on record to say that we don't share people's data. That is very serious. We respect people's privacy, and this has been our program since the beginning, as far as I'm concerned. And I do think that is what all organizations should be thinking about, protecting and letting folks know how they use their data. At the same time, I think it's important for us to allow folks the options to decide to share or not share their data with us, right? Before, I think there was a lot of lack of clarity on what's being shared or what's being generated. But I think being upfront and saying, hey, we don't share your data, but sometimes we use your data to learn about how well our products are performing. Sometimes we use your data to learn where some of our partners need to be or where we need to improve something. And so getting ahead of that and communicating in such a way and reminding folks that they can tell us how we can improve experiences, but we're not going to expose them to any harm or anything inappropriate has really been the key to our success, and really reinforces how Planned Parenthood can be a place that you can trust when you come to our WIC properties or just our health centers or anything where we provide support.
That's great. And I know all this conversation right now has been talking about a lot of like theory and building teams and success, but can you share a story of where you saw the impact of your team's work and what you do firsthand, where you saw, wow, like I did this is something my team did and it's amazing?
I would say probably, I mean, there's so many examples, but I would, if I had to take a look at the national example, is when a couple years ago, we saw a Supreme Court case called Dobbs change the landscape of abortion across this country. And I think for our team, while we have spent a lot of time educating folks around what their options are, what they can do to educate themselves and receive care, we could have never anticipated the patchwork that started to emerge across the country, the fear and challenges that people had trying to understand what the laws were, what access looked like, or what information looked like. And the thing that was so important to me was our team. We didn't even have to explain to them that this was the most important thing that we needed to take on. And so as earlier as I spoke to the cross-divisional group of folks that it takes to build any team, well, our team really stood up, brought people together, and reimagined what the education awareness funnel and important information that people needed to know about access to abortion. Like, they really committed to that work and continue to be committed to that work. And we see it because we see more people getting information and getting the care they need. We see folks understanding how much the landscape has changed and what their options are. And I think that our team feels duty and responsibility to make sure that's constantly updated. And so we're watching that. So we see the impact of good information and optimized workflows and giving folks what they need from not only the front end side and the back end side, but just the experience itself.
Yeah, I know that is a hot topic, let's say, but I feel like that really gives an example and anecdote as to the type of environment that you have to work within, reacting to things happening outside in the world, very challenging stuff, topics that can feel very heavy for people. So definitely gives me a sense of you're building product, but there's a lot that goes into this beyond just building product, right? There's emotion,
Absolutely.
there's environment. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Thank you. We're very proud to speak to it, just so you know.
Yeah, and I love that you shared that. So I know we've covered a lot today, from building high impact teams, measuring success, kind of future of emerging technology. Before we wrap things up, I want to do a quick fire segment I like to call hot takes. So I'm going to just throw out some common beliefs or assumptions in the tech world. Just want your quick take on them, a quick agree, disagree, and why. No long explanations, just like kind of your gut reaction to some of these.
Trivia. I love it.
Okay, let's start with this one. The best innovations come from startups and not large organizations.
I completely disagree with that because there are so many cute, like cool startup type environments within large organizations, and I'm one of them. So,
Awesome. I did start with that. I felt like you would have a strong gut reaction, so I started with that one. All right, let's do another one here. Remote work makes it harder to build a strong team culture.
I absolutely agree with that. I've been challenged in the last few years around it, but yeah, it's inherent with a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I feel that one as well. We since the pandemic, we have closed our offices, have gone fully remote as well, and we've done our best. But I feel like there's only so much you can do. So I definitely am seeing a resurgence of employees wanting to do more in-person stuff, albeit not necessarily going back to office. But I agree there. Let's see if we can do one more here. Okay, here we go. Last one here. Fail fast, fail often is terrible advice for a mission-driven team.
I completely disagree.
Completely disagree.
Yeah, I tell you why. Because sometimes in our work, we see failure as a bad thing, and I would rather fail quickly on a thing and more often on a thing just to know that that's not the right thing than to just stick with a thing that's not working or stick with a thing that like is, I fundamentally, folks will tell you on my team, failure is not a big deal. Just don't break the whole system, right? Don't break the whole system. And if you fail a few times, it's okay. We'll pick it up and we'll move it forward.
Yeah, I think probably one of the hardest things as I've progressed in my career and, become higher up in the ladder is learning to accept failure. It can feel so devastating when you're young and trying to work your way up there, but I agree as well. It's better to fail faster and then use it as a learning opportunity and focus on the positive instead of the failure itself.
I'll just tell you, as you're coming up, that's not good for a leader either, right? So that doesn't get any better late in your career when you're
Ugh.
on top of things. It still feels the same. It's just always a challenge. It's a trade-off.
I was internalizing that feeling, but thank you for validating that. Even myself as a leader, I feel like I don't want to fail, but I know it's part of the job. So thank you. That was fun. Thank you for playing that game with me. Kevin, before we go, we like to wrap up our episodes with what we call our Majestyk Byte. If listeners take away just one thing from this episode, what would it be?
I always say, be fearless and stay unapologetic. Chill. It's not that serious. It's going to be fine.
Fantastic. I think people just always need to hear that, even though it's something they may have had before. All right, that is it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, let us know. Drop a comment on social media in the comments and share this with someone who you think needs to hear it. And if you want to learn more about Kevin's work, you can check out PlannedParenthood.org. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on the Product Builders Podcast. And Kevin, thanks for being such a great guest today.
Thank you. It was great to be here. Such an honor. Appreciate it.